Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Marriage and Motherhood with me, Michelle Perda, your host. Today's episode is a question I get pretty often when it comes to working on your marriage. If you don't know, I'm a marriage coach and I work exclusively with moms. I do not work with couples. And society has pretty much defined the go-to route when it comes to working on your marriage as couples counseling, right? Couples counseling is great. But what if one of two things happens? What if your husband doesn't want to go? Or what if it doesn't work? Then what, right? Then what? Does it mean that your relationship is doomed? Maybe, maybe not. And I wanted to let you know that there are more options than couples counseling. For example, there's marriage coaching. There are retreats. There are workshops. There are classes. There is so much out there available to you. And I want you to know that if you're in this situation where you feel lost in your marriage, you know you're unhappy, you don't know what to do next, and counseling is not an option, you are not doomed. You are not doomed to be forever unhappy, or you're not necessarily sealing the fate that it's divorce time, right? And so couples counseling is great if your partner is open and willing to go. And if they're not, and you're wondering, well, why would that work? Why would another way work if they're not going with me? So how can my marriage change without dragging them into counseling? And so this episode is all about that. Okay. So questions that might be lingering in your mind are like, how can that possibly work if they're not part of it? If no one's going to tell them what they're doing wrong, am I right? Or am I right? Right. So the question's like, what about my partner? And here's the thing, right? We only have control over ourselves, and we have so much more influence over how we experience our marriage than we give ourselves credit for, right? There are so many different aspects of what it takes to have a successful marriage that you may not be considering, right? If you're like me, it's very easy to be like, you are doing A, B, C, all the way through Z things wrong. And so when you fix that, we'll be happy. But the problem with that mentality, again, right? That is my go-to. The problem with that mentality is that there is a lack of responsibility there. Where you are at right now, you have contributed to as well. Whether you allowed something to happen, whether you made it happen, either way, you have some responsibility there too. It is not all on your partner. And you might even be thinking, well, why do I have to do the work? And sure, you can sit in that resentful place, that bitterness, or you can ask yourself, how much do I want this to work? Am I willing to bypass my pride and do what I need to do to ensure that this marriage succeeds, or know that I did everything I could to aid in that happening, right? Regardless of what the result is, whether you end up happier or whether you end up more clear and have confidence that the decision to move forward away from your marriage is the right decision for you, right? Not from a place of I'm leaving because I'm angry and I feel unloved and so on and so forth, but from a place of, I've done everything I can do to support this marriage in succeeding. And it seems like we're just not compatible. Right? I love this phrase that a friend recently shared with me. Don't leave anything until you're happy. Not to mean to stay in any situation until it has everything that you want, but don't decide to leave until you can make the decision from a clear conscience, not from anger and resentment and frustration, but like, no, this is genuinely the right decision for me. Okay. So back to the influence part. I'm going to ask you a number of questions. This is like a live journaling exercise. So if you want, bust out your journal, ask yourself these questions and see what comes up for you, right? So we have so much more influence. We can empower ourselves to create more change than we give ourselves credit for. And how we deal with things, with ourselves, with how we approach things, how we show up as a partner, really plays a huge factor and heavily impacts how we experience our marriage, right? Because if we do something, then our partner will do, their thing. And when that shifts, so will they, right? So for example, what's your current baseline right now? Like, how do you feel in general? How well are you taking care of your own needs, right? Self-care is such a huge thing when it comes to being happy in general, but also in your marriage. Because when you don't take care of yourself, you're coming from a place of depletion. You don't have much capacity to be loving, fun, flirty, and patient and compassionate, right? So how well are you taking care of yourself right now? Are your boundaries strong, or can they be worked on, right? Are you saying yes to everything because you should? Air quotes on should, right? Are you shoulding all over yourself? Like, are you burned out? What kind of a communicator are you? Do you over communicate? Do you communicate? Do you under communicate? What's your approach? Are you aggressive? Are you assertive? Are you passive? Are you a hybrid where you're passive aggressive? Right? Do you even know what you want and need? Or do you expect your partner to know because you feel like they've spent enough time around you that they should be able to read your mind? How comfortable are you with your emotions? And do you know how to regulate your nervous system when you're triggered or activated? When we are high and deep in our emotions, it's no mystery we're not ourselves, right? The hurt part of us shows up and we either get aggressive, we become anxious, we feel unworthy. We tend to make the issue seem bigger than they actually are because we're experiencing really intense feelings. And our brain loves to look for evidence that proves us to be true, right? And so if you're highly emotional during a fight, and a part of you has always wondered why no one loves you the way you want to be loved, or you feel unlovable, you're going to find evidence in your partner's actions and reactions and words and body language that's true. And it's kind of crazy, right? That thing is called the reticular activating system. So a more practical example of that is like, have you ever thought of like, hey, I want to buy this car. And all of a sudden when you go out driving, you notice it everywhere, right? It doesn't mean that people or the universe or whatever knew that you wanted this car and all of a sudden everybody else but you has it. It's that you are now hyper focused on seeing that thing, right? So, do you know how to self soothe yourself so that you can show up in conflict in a grounded place where you're able to respond rather than react? Or are you highly reactive, right? All of that is normal, but not all of that is supportive of the relationship, right? Personally, I go into a place of like, oh my gosh, we need to talk this out, or something bad is going to happen. And I tell myself that he doesn't care about me, which is not true, right? But again, my brain looks for evidence of that, right? Oh, he didn't check on me, or he didn't follow me, or he didn't ask me this question. He didn't phrase it this way, right? I start spiraling. But now that I know how to regulate my nervous system and really see my emotions as a gift and the best teacher, I now am able to take that time and feel my feelings, pause, reflect, and be able to turn around and share my experience rather than do what I normally do or in the past, which is blame, attack, criticize, and essentially create this dynamic where my partner becomes defensive or starts to dish it back to me, right? So, how do you handle conflict? How do you handle conflict? What are your go-to patterns when you're in a conflict? Do you start to, play the victim role? Do you start to nag? Do you start to criticize? Do you start to blame, roll your eyes, pop your hip out, cross your arms, roll, like whatever? What do you do? What's your go-to patterns? Are you even in a space where you can listen to your partner, or are you listening to respond, right? Like, are you just like listening to just enough so that you can come back with a powerful but aggressive response to prove them wrong, to prove yourself right? Or are you able to hold space and truly be like, okay, I'm mad and I understand that you're mad too. Let me hear you out about your experience, because listening to your experience doesn't lessen or dismiss or negate my experience, right? Do you give your partner the benefit of the doubt, or do you assume the worst? My go-to is to assume the worst, right? I take everything as they say offensively, and I very much play the victim, which then starts like this whole cycle of them shutting down or not knowing what to say, because everything they're saying, even if it's with good intentions, is not being perceived in a positive light. Yeah. So is what you're saying and acting putting them on defense mode, right? So this is just like the surface of how you can be contributing to how your marriage feels right now in this very moment, right? So as you can see, there are a lot of ways, lots of room for growth to show up as the right partner, rather than only expecting your partner to be the right partner for you, right? It's about you being able to show up as a right partner, irregardless of how your partner is showing up. For you to be able to be like, I have full confidence and pride in how I'm showing up. How you're able to, like, with a lot of agility and intentionality, navigate conflict, no matter what gets thrown your way, to be able to hold space for your experience, hold strong boundaries in a respectful way, and have the capacity to hear them out as well, and have the capacity and patience and compassion to resolve the issue together as a team, right? So the thing is that by now, right? For however long you've been together, you two likely have a pattern, or what I call a dance that you guys do, right? If you are in a situation where you're like, doesn't matter what we fight about, I know what's going to happen. When I do this, they do that. And then I do this, and then I do that. And then I do this, and then they do that. And then you know exactly how it's going to end because you're basically doing the same song and dance over and over and over again. You have created a pattern. You have created a choreography that you keep dancing to. And so the reason why doing the work on your own can work is because if you just change that pattern, just in the slightest, where instead of stepping forward, you step to the side, you have now opened up more opportunities to inject intentionality in there. You have opened up an opportunity for your partner to now respond in a different way, right? So for example, let's say, your partner didn't do the dishes because for whatever reason, maybe they're tired or something. And you automatically feel like you are taken for granted. And so whenever you feel taken for granted, you start like raising hell. And because you feel taken for granted, you're like, why do I have to do everything around this house? How come you can't help me? And, you go down that route of like, if you love me, you would do this. Why don't you do this? I wish someone would do this, et cetera, right? And then your partner's like feeling dismissed because it's almost like you totally disregarded everything that they do and blanket statement it, like the whole situation, like that he doesn't do anything at all. And so then he starts to get defensive and starts to say some things. And then you start to feel attacked because he's not apologetic. And then back and forth and back and forth. But what if instead of going down that route of, complaining, let's call it what it is, and saying, hey, I noticed that the dishes weren't done like you normally do them. Are you still able to get to it today? That would yield a different result from him, right? And there are so many moments in arguments and encounters where you can make a shift, choose to respond or approach the situation differently so that he can then respond in kind. Because instead of you doing the whole nagging, complaining thing, you have now done this, and then they can respond differently. The options are now different, right? Or let's say they start to initiate their pattern that can be destructive for the relationship. And instead of riding the roller coaster with them, you decide to just sit right there and hold your boundary and let them know that that's not okay and drive the conversation back to being productive. You now have different options too, right? Now they're dealing with a different version of you, and they get to choose how they respond differently because you have essentially decided to do a different dance. And when you do that, that's when change can happen, right? So no, you do not need your partner to go to counseling with you if that is not an option. And change can happen with only one person focusing on doing the work. Because as you do the work, you become more of the right partner that your marriage needs. And they have the opportunity to be influenced by how you're being, because you are no longer being that person that you were before. And they get to decide how they choose to be. because hello, free will, right? And in that way, you can start to see what might happen, the potential change that could result in you being different, you stepping into a different, healthier pattern for your marriage, and giving your partner the opportunity to respond in a favorable way as well. Again, their choice, right? Your choice to show up differently, their choice to show up differently. But at least at the end of the day, you can say, okay, my hands are clean. I have shown up as the right partner, not right as in like I'm right, you're wrong, but in a way where you can not regret how you behaved, right? You did not intentionally do the relationship harm. You were fully attuned to what was going on. You stayed true to yourself and you are compassionate and respectful to the relationship. Okay. This is why it works. I have clients that will tell you that it works. And this does not absolve your partner from doing any work. All this is to say that one person focusing on doing the work is enough. Okay. Because at the end of the day, you cannot force their hand to, be your puppet, to show up how you want them to be. At the end of the day, they decide how they want to show up. All you have to do is focus on yourself, how you are behaving, how you are feeling, and how clear you are about what your needs are. They get to decide if they want to be the person that fulfills that. And if they're not, at least you know. I feel like either way, it's a win, right? Your marriage either changes for the better, or you get really clear that, oh, maybe this is not the marriage for us. And maybe we would be better off with different people, or moving on from this and living separately and just being co-parents, right? Being happy is the end goal here, not to be married. Ideally, the marriage would be, improved and changed and everything would be fantastic. But the end goal here is to not force the marriage to be happy. It's to do the work, influence change, give it an opportunity to. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. At least in the process, you have grown as a person and you will be that much more ready for the next partnership. And you will be that much happier because you will love yourself so much more in the process. You will feel like, wow, I cannot believe how much I've grown, how well I deal with conflict now, how open and vulnerable I'm willing to be, how clear I am about my needs, and know that this has nothing to do with whether I'm worthy of love or not. This was just an incompatibility issue. Okay, so that's all I've got for you today. This is all for you to know that just because your partner doesn't want to go to counseling doesn't mean that there's nothing left for you to do. Okay. I hope that you really take the time to answer all the questions that I included in this episode, because that's all the work that we do in my coaching sessions. We take a look at your inner world and figure out what's going on, right? What past experiences, what inner child wounds are coming up for you? What is your attachment style? What is the need underneath all of these like layers that are hiding the true core need that you desire? And how do we go about doing that, right? It's not just about, oh, how do I communicate better, right? Because when you communicate better, but you don't know how to handle and regulate your system, it doesn't matter, because you're just going to toss the handbook and be like, I'm not following this because I'm mad as hell, right? So much work that you can do. This is all work that I do for myself, that have done and continue to do to have the successful, fulfilling marriage that I have today. And it works. It does. Okay. So don't be afraid to do the inner work, because how you experience your relationship with yourself truly impacts how you experience your relationship with others. And you can only go as deep as you've gone with yourself with other people. Okay. If you are unwilling to really take a good look at your emotions, sit with it, feel them, learn from them, and learn how the body and mind connection works, as well as, doing any of the inner healings from your past experiences, that's going to make all the difference. You doing that work makes all the difference. So it's not about just doing the right thing, saying the right thing. There's so much more to it. And you honestly deserve to feel comfortable and have the courage to do that type of work, because that's what's going to create that sustainable change, the type of love that you truly desire, where you feel seen. But first, you got to feel seen by yourself. So I hope that this episode landed for you and that you are taking away a lot from this so that you can go improve your experience of your marriage. And if you need guidance, this is exactly the work that I do with my one-on-one clients. And so if this is resonating with you and you want to be able to do these things and show up as the right partner and be able to create change in your marriage, reach out and let's see if one-on-one coaching is for you. I got you. All right. Have an amazing, beautiful day. I will talk to you later. Bye.